welcome to you and good afternoon to everyone who's tuning in today. After about 50 webinars and different sessions across the past 6 months and 5,000 participants, we had a short summer break. We've come back now for our second season, and we're now in our second episode of our Global Leaders series, and we're welcoming one of the biggest names in fintech here with us today, live from Hong Kong, Mr. Henri Arslanian.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here, Nasir.
Great to have you, Henri. Let me give you some of your background to the listeners here, although I'm pretty sure that that's no longer a secret to most people. Henri is the PwC Global Crypto Leader and former chairman of the Fintech Association of Hong Kong. With over 500,000 LinkedIn followers, Henri is a TEDx and global keynote speaker, a best-selling author, regularly featured in global media, including Bloomberg, CNBC, CNN, The Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times. Henri was named by LinkedIn as one of the global top voices in economy and finance, and is the host of Fintech Capsules and Crypto Capsules social media series. Henri was recently named by Analytica as the #1 most influential individual on finance globally on LinkedIn out of 50,000 individuals working as the top professional services and management consulting firm in the world. Chambers Global named Henri the highest profile fintech consultant in Hong Kong. An Asian private banker awarded him the Fintech Changemaker of the Year award. Henri's latest book, The Future of Finance, The Impact of Fintech, AI, and Crypto on Financial Services, published by Palgrave Macmillan, was ranked as one of Amazon's global top 10 bestsellers in financial services and was recognized as one of the best fintech books of all time by Book Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy to have you here, Henri. Fantastic that you could come with us, and thank you for staying up late to be with us here today.
It's always a pleasure. I remember I was last year actually in Luxembourg physically, and I look forward to being back hopefully soon. So thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. I know you have a choice of things to do, and so thank you for tuning in for our conversation.
Henri, I think I've got to ask you and kick this off with asking you the biggest question is, why are you doing this? How did you get into this? I mean, I had a brief look at LinkedIn, looked at some of your background. It doesn't say crypto, digital that much. But yet you've exploded onto the scene and has become this authority in the crypto and blockchain markets over the past few years. How did this all happen? What gave you the motivation? Where did you start?
Sure. First of all, that's my real passion is the future of finance and future of money. It just happened that I work and I'm able to be a living out of it. No, my background, as many of the listeners may know, I was born in Montreal, Canada, the beautiful French-speaking part of Canada. I'm Armenian by background, so grew up a very traditional, very normal life, and obviously I went to law school, became a lawyer. Then I started, and then what really I've always had this what I call this immigrant mentality that I'm always paranoid. What's coming up, what's next. I tell this to my students today. I always sit on the edge of my seat. And I remember at a time, I was very fortunate to be, very good in school. I was able to get a best law school in Canada. But I said, there's something more. And I decided to leave for China. I literally bought a book called Chinese for Dummies, jumped on a plane from Canada to Beijing, learned how to count on the plane next to this lady who couldn't sleep either. Did a master's in Chinese law, learned Chinese. And at a time, again, this is like 15 years ago, everybody made fun of me. Literally everybody, half of the people thought I was going to Japan. They didn't know the difference. And of course, now everybody knows what happened in China. But obviously after that, I worked as a lawyer. I went to banking. And even when I was in banking, I used to work for UBS here in Hong Kong. I should say this industry is going to change. And to the point that my nickname became Fintech Henri. Literally, that was how I was called at the bank. People made fun of me. And at the time, eventually, I decided to lead to really focus on this in this area. And it's really, like they always say, it's this whole attitude is always this immigrant mentality, always staying at the edge of your seat. Even to this day, Nasir, every month, I have 1 hour blocked in my calendar. I go somewhere by myself. I sit down and I reflect and I say, how am I being disrupted? Are my competitors doing something I'm not doing? Is it on social media? Is there something I should be doing? And I'm continuously paranoid. And I really believe moving forward, especially in the crypto space, the fintech space, but also more generally, this kind of attitude I think will be very essential. Be paranoid, but also be paranoid optimist, like from that perspective. So that's kind of the high level background, if you want, of how I discovered this passion.
Okay, so you've talked a little bit here just now about the means and the sort of way you're going about doing things and being disruptive. What's the purpose? What's the end goal here for you, Henri? What drives you every day? Where are you going with all this?
Well, when it comes to finance, actually fintech, the really what really drove me initially, as many you may know, I wear many hats. One of them, I'm a adjunct professor at the University of Hong Kong, where I teach actually the first fintech university course in Asia. And what really the reason I started doing this was I thought it was unacceptable that we let, for example, students graduate out of universities without courses on fintech, frankly, on more technology more broadly. And actually, when these young people enter the workspace, they're not the workforce. I'm sorry, they're not even trained. They're not even ready to actually join and do the work that actually the employers expect from them. I can tell you at PwC often we have to retrain people just after they graduate university, which shows that there's a massive disconnect between the education system and the workforce. And that's the reason actually on my educational capabilities, I try to train, at least provide practical teaching to my students in order to better train them for the world that is coming ahead. And that's the reason as well. You mentioned my book in your introduction, Nasir, and that's the reason I wrote my books as well. It happens, obviously the book did very well. I'm working on my next book right now, by the way, on called The Future of Money. A lot of my audience are people who work right now in financial services. They're realizing the world is changing. They want to get educated. They want to learn about it. And that's actually, I find it's a way to empower people. So that's what actually I have to say. It really drives me a lot in the stuff that I do, whether it's my teaching, my book, and in particular social media. You mentioned in my introduction, my weekly shows that I have on LinkedIn, my Fintech Capsule show and my Crypto Capsule show. The Crypto Capsule is a great example. Now, obviously, it's one of the most popular shows on LinkedIn, but it's a 60-second show that covers all the latest developments in the crypto ecosystem. That 60-second takes me between 4 to 6 hours every week. My newsletter that comes out every weekend, it will come up on Sunday this week. Again, people can subscribe on LinkedIn. It takes me between 10 to 12 hours. Actually, after this webinar, it's going to be 8 p.m. in Hong Kong. I'll be working probably till midnight, 1 a.m. on writing the newsletter for Sunday, actually. Okay. And the reason it drives this, actually, I think is great. People deserve to know. People deserve to share. And I really believe if you provide people with content, value, and insights that is practical, people appreciate it. And that's, I think, one of the key of the success as well.
Okay, and I mean, you work with PwC obviously as well, and I think we've gotten to know each other in that capacity as well. I mean, how do PwC view this? Are they working with you on this? Do they see this evangelism to some degree as part of adding value to PwC as well?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I hope so. But the reality is, I believe
they know you, so it must be.
Well, obviously, I'm a partner at PwC here. I have to say, as a disclaimer, all the videos that I do, everything I do on my own. So I pay by my own. I cover the costs. I do everything. My production, everything is done. PwC has nothing to do with it. Of course, there's an indirect benefit to the organization that I work for. And I really believe this is the future of professional services as well. I think there's the type of people that any organization should look for right now. There's obviously the entrepreneurs that we need in the startup world, but we need the intrapreneurs, people, especially post-COVID, who can come and be ready to transform the organizations they work for. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest skill set that is required. But also, I believe fundamentally, the world of professional services, whether you're law firms, accountants, any other professional services firm, will evolve dramatically over the coming years. I always say I think it's going to become a bit like professional football, where you have a couple of stars who frankly can go play any team they want, and but people will know the players. It just happens they work for a team. I mean, people will know Ronaldo, whether Ronaldo plays for Manchester United, plays for Juventus, or for AC Milan. People don't care. They want to go see Ronaldo. And I think that's the same approach you're going to see in professional services over the next couple of years. And this is why I think it's very important. The advice I give to a lot of young people, especially, is I think your reputation, but also your personal brand is very, very important, especially within the limits of your organization you work with. But I think everybody should have a personal brand. It's never been easier. Literally right now, all you need is a phone. I film all my videos on my iPhone. I've watched on one phone. All my videos you see, everything is filmed on this iPhone. It's never been easier. It's never been cheaper. And I think the ROI on it has never been more important, especially as the industry and professional services, and frankly, any other industry evolves, particularly post-COVID.
Okay, but did you? I mean, going into the crypto capsule and the web the podcasts that you do online, I mean, they've gained you a lot of popularity. You have a tremendous, incredible amount of followers. How did you come up with the idea, and why? And how are you keeping up to date with all this information and trends? I mean, so much is happening in the world of digital assets, crypto, blockchain. Where are you sourcing all this information, and why did you choose to do it in this way?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nasir. Let me address it in two parts. First is why I started doing my videos. Actually, what people don't know, I've been working on my social media for many years, actually. And people obviously see the success that I have now, but nobody knows the early years. I can tell you the first 2 years were very depressing. There's nothing worse than you spend an entire weekend writing an article, reading a video, editing it, and literally gets zero traction. You can still see those posts, actually. I think they're still on LinkedIn. And there's nothing more depressing than that. And I have to say, I was very fortunate that I chugged along. I continued, and about 2 years in, really hit that hockey stick. And even today, by the way, every month I get 4 to 5 people at least reach out to me. To the point that I made a video. I have videos now on YouTube where that clearly explain how I film my crypto capsules and actually what equipment that I use, how I prepare for my speeches, and how I prepare for it. So anybody can actually, it's there. I don't make any money out of it. All the equipment that I use, I have no referral agreements. I have nothing out of it. And actually, people can actually do it. The biggest challenge is actually sticking to it until it hits the hockey stick. The secret I find is you always got to focus on your audience. I think this is the biggest problem with social media today. People will just go brag about what they're doing or talk about what they're doing or their companies. I think when often companies do marketing, it's not seen as genuine. Nobody cares about it. When actually you focus on providing genuine value to your audience will appreciate. And I think that's the way to gain the traction around it. How I do it is actually very simple. I mean, for my crypto capsule, every day because of my work, I obviously follow crypto markets and digital assets very, very closely. And I also synthesize it for myself. So that's how all the big developments that come in, I try to share it with the public. The one thing that I find is very important is, I guess many of the listeners today, we're all in the fintech bubble. We're on the crypto bubble. We will care. We will follow the news. You're passionate about it. You'll read about this on the weekends. But we forget often 99% of the population, frankly, they just want to know the essentials. And that's how I came up with a 60-second concept. My rule was, if somebody gets in the elevator, which I find, by the way, are the most antisocial places in the world right now, people all stick on their phone. I need to be able to deliver my content the time the person gets in the elevator, waits for it until they get to their floor. And that's how I came up with the 60-second concept, and which has proven. By the way, Nasir, one thing often people don't know, I was very criticized for that model. I will never forget when I came out with my 60-second concept. Somebody who will remain nameless right now, but very known in the thought leadership industry, came and saw me and said, Henry, I don't believe in your 60-second concept. I think CEOs want to read in-depth 25, 30-page reports. No, my answer was, I don't know any CEO who has time to read 25, 30-page reports. But again, and I said, you know what, we'll see you on the other side. And I still believe it's more difficult to create a video that is 60 seconds than one that is 60 minutes. Because really creating short content is extremely, extremely difficult. So this is a backstory, if you want, of the crypto capsules from that perspective.
Yeah. And so just the second part of that as well, the information. How are you staying on top of the information with your daily work at PwC, et cetera, and making sure you have the latest, greatest content?
Yeah, on the information. So if you want my day-to-day, so when I wake up, if you want, I always come to the office quite early. I tend to be pretty early at the office, and I make sure that I have a 25, 30-minute time where I go through the news and newsletters, everything that happened the day before, and I'm aware of everything happening before the day starts, if you want. And generally, when I go through a process, I'm able to filter what is important and actually synthesize it for the audience. But also, especially for my capsules, just because obviously the show has gone quite big, I get now a lot of actually newsletters and media briefings directly sent from the companies. So often a lot of these organizations, I've become kind of part of their media distribution list, and I get sent a lot of their content from that perspective as well. So the way I actually do my crypto capsule is throughout the week, every time I see an article or an idea that I like, I will actually save it on a Google Doc, literally. And then when I come the day before, I'm going to film for example, I filmed a crypto capsule yesterday. It got posted 2 hours ago. So yesterday was Thursday. I filmed on Wednesday night. I wrote my script. Thursday morning, I tweak it if anything needs to be done. I actually now send it to a proofreader to make sure that the English is my third language after Armenian and French. So unfortunately, I do still a lot of mistakes. So I make sure it's proofread. and then it gets filmed on this week. It got filmed yesterday on Thursday, literally on my iPhone and a tripod that I have here. And then I send it to an editing team. It actually cost me quite a bit of money actually to do professional editing and post-production. But again, I see this as an investment. I genuinely believe it is money I spent from my own pocket because I really believe it's an investment. And actually, that's another advice I give to a lot of people. I believe everybody, especially in a post-COVID environment, it's worth considering whether as part of your annual budget, you decide to put a certain amount where you're investing on your brand, actually. And I think post-production and editing is something that I believe makes a difference. For example, subtitles, Nasir. One thing that people often, I have now, for example, on LinkedIn, there's a new feature called Stories. So I do every morning a LinkedIn story that I don't edit it, right? It's very easy. I film it. But I spend actually quite a bit of time and money making sure there's professional subtitles. And the reason I believe a lot of people right now watch my videos at the office, in the subway, or in bed or other places where they cannot bring the audio up. And again, it brings up to the concept, you always got to think about your audience. It would be easier for me just to film it, put it on. But actually, if you spend the time to editing and putting the subtitles, your audience appreciates it. And I think that makes a big difference as well.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, I'll give a little plug here that maybe could be useful to you, Henri, but in the next few weeks, hopefully by the end of November, we're actually launching an app, a news aggregation app, which hopefully might be useful to you, which is connected to IBM Watson and will find you the best stories and learn about the kind of things you're interested in. So hopefully that could maybe save you some time once we get that out to market.
Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Good. Listen, talking about the customer and this world of crypto, obviously this past few years has seen, as you say, a hockey stick in terms of the focus on the area of digital assets and crypto. Let's start with the big pie in the sky question. I mean, obviously you believe in this world, otherwise you wouldn't be talking about it. Where do you see it going, and in what space of time? What can we expect, do you think, in terms of major milestones, say, in the next 1 year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to say I genuinely believe this is the most exciting time in the history of finance, and in particular, one of the most exciting time in the history of money. I think our generation will see stuff that happens every 100, 150 years, and especially when it comes to money. I think that's super exciting from that perspective. The caveat that I give before all my keynotes around the world is that whoever tells you they're an expert in crypto, you got to run away. Literally, I spend 24/7 of my time in this space. I'm a bit of a loser. I'm a bit of a nerd. I literally read about crypto on Saturday nights. Literally, I printed my stuff, what I'm going to be, the stuff I will be doing over the weekend. I think it's very difficult to know what's going to happen even a month from now. Just look at last week in crypto. Literally, as the time we're filming this right now, literally, there was the PayPal announcement with 250 million coming in. You had the JP Morgan announcement with Onyx. You had the DBS reportedly news that they are getting into the space. You had the Square where they put a 1% of their assets in treasury in Bitcoin. You had MicroStrategy the month before. And even yesterday you had with some of these developments going on with exchanges where they're offering the fractional shares. It's incredible how fast things are moving. The big ideas, if you want, that I'm watching, let's say the next 12 months. So let's take it as you asked a question on the next 12 months. The big topic that I'm watching the next 12 months are three things. One is actually the whole area with central bank digital currencies. Basically, with central banks issuing their own currency. I think there's been right now 80% of central banks are doing some kind of research or activity around it. I believe, obviously, it's been now a year and change since the Libra announcement. Since then, obviously, a lot of things are being catalyzed. The big development, and we could talk about it if you want, is really what's happening in China. As many of your listeners know, China is probably 4 to 6 years ahead to the rest of the world when it comes to B2C fintech. I would argue China, when it comes to the future of money right now, has taken an incredible lead. Just to give an example, the People's Bank of China has been researching CBDC since 2014. That's 7 years ago. And now we're seeing many countries in the West now decide maybe they're going to start researching it. So that's an incredible lead that gives you, right? So CBDCs are one thing I'm watching. We can talk about it if you want. The second thing I'm watching very closely are stable coins. I actually think before the adoption of CBDCs, we'll see stable coins. Today, we have about 20 billion of CBDC in value if you want in the market. We are now seeing increased usage of CBDC in cross-border payments. I'm the best example. A couple of weeks ago, I had to send money from my lovely Hong Kong bank account to my sister in Canada. My lovely bank in Hong Kong does not do FX on a Sunday. Go figure. And of course, there's FX fees, hidden fees, all transaction fees. I just sent stable coins, and I can guarantee you that's the way I'll operate moving forward. So watching what's happening, especially on commercial transactions, what's happening with CBDC. And I'm also obviously watching what's happening with institutionalization of the crypto industry. Large financial institutions coming in. And this week, it's a great example with JP Morgan, DBS, and also the crypto industry becoming institutionalized. So a lot of them obviously getting a proper legal, everything from boring stuff from KYC, AML, procedures, frameworks, to some of the more fancy stuff like SOC 1, SOC 2, Big Four audit, and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm watching on the short term. Really, what I think is super exciting for the next 5 years is what's really exciting me is actually with the rise of digital assets, we should be able to handle not only better financial inclusion, because literally now a bank account is an app on your phone, and obviously you're able to service more people, but also I genuinely believe we should be able to have a fighting chance against some of the biggest problem we have in society today, like money laundering. Today, if you want to buy drugs, you want to launder money, again, the best way is good old cash. Nobody knows where it's coming from. You can know where you spend it. Government has no views on it. I mean, that's why I always say people, if you're a drug dealer, you want to buy drugs, or you want to do something illegal, use cash. Do not use Bitcoin. You will get caught. I think CBDCs, for the first time in a very long time, will give us a fighting chance against money laundering, for example, broader tackling illicit funds. So I think it's going to be very interesting from that perspective. But also what I'm really watching the next 5 years is, in the event that we have a retail central bank digital currency, it's for the first time we're going to get a third form of central bank money. Today, there's only two kinds of central bank money. It's actually banknotes that you have. Yeah. It's the reserves your bank holds as a central bank. And we may be a lucky generation that's going to see a third form of central bank money in the form of digital currency or CBDC. So these are some of the things I'm watching really over the next couple of months. And obviously, the longer term, there's all the exciting stuff going on with DeFi, for example, decentralized finance. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges with DeFi. We're at the very early stages right now. But I think some of the concepts of DeFi, especially what we call composability, which is the financial Lego, where you can literally take any DeFi application, put them together, and you can build it. Imagine if you could take today any fintech startup in Luxembourg, put them together and create your own startup. That's what you're able to do literally today in DeFi, and that's super exciting. So really, I think all of us, everybody listening to this, we are a very lucky generation. People, our kids, our grandchildren will look back at the period we're in right now with the financial crisis and COVID and say, wow, this was a moment of pivotal change in the history of finance and money. I think, and we're great to be part of, not only being part of it, but having the privilege of even driving part of it. I think that's super exciting.
Okay. Just one quick point that I wanted to make to our audience. Do remember to post your questions. We'll have a Q&A with Henri later on in this conversation. Now, Henri, you said a few things there that I want to pick up on. I mean, obviously, you're a fountain of knowledge on this. First thing, you talked about, well, actually, let's take a step. You mentioned quite a number of notable sort of news and advances occurring, and it just seems like so much is happening. You mentioned Libra. I mean, I look back at Libra, and I'd like your opinion on this, but I saw that as genuinely pivotal. That was the moment to me that the regulators, the world, the central banks, everyone kind of woke up and realized, wow, things are changing massively. Do you agree with that? What were some of the other key moments in this digital asset space, do you think, that are really shaping now the progress going forward?
Absolutely. I think there's two of them, without any doubt. In June 2019, when Libra was announced, that is a pivotal moment in the history of money. And I always say, half jokingly, all of us, we should send a bouquet of flowers to Mark Zuckerberg to thank him for having catalyzed this conversation. I mean, I know firsthand, I used to have a lot of meetings with banks, with policymakers, and frankly, other legacy organizations before Libra. And I had the slides that I would say, one day this big tech will launch their own currency. And everybody used to laugh at me, it became, nobody took it seriously. And of course, when Libra happened, suddenly those guys are laughing at me, started calling me back. So obviously, I think in the history of money, Libra was a pivotal moment. There was obviously It may not be perfect. Obviously, Libra obviously pivoted in April of 2020 with the Libra 2.0, for lack of a better word, when some of the changes were made. But for sure, that catalyzed a conversation, especially with central banks. I have to say, I think in the fintech ecosystem, in the crypto ecosystem in particular, I don't think we give credit right now to what central banks are doing. I have to say I'm very impressed with some of the work that some central banks have been doing in the last 6 to 12 months. Very impressed, the level of knowledge, the level of push, and actually the fact that even the organizations like Bank for International Settlements, how they've been, not only the research they've been doing, but how they've been pushing central banks to actually innovate on money, which I think is very, very important from that perspective. So I think that Libra for sure has become one of the big elements I think will be remembered. And obviously now as it's become a stable coin, it brings up a lot of other, pushes a lot of other dynamics which we could talk about. I think the second big moment that is happening right now is happening as we speak in China. I've been very fortunate, as I mentioned before. I used to live in China, and obviously I used to go to China quite a lot before the COVID situation. I think it's obviously China was practically cashless. What's happening right now there with the DCEP, with the digital currency electronic payment, which is their equivalent of a retail CBDC, is really at a different level. I mean, just to put things in perspective, the last pilot that was launched, over the equivalent of $160 million of value was transacted. There were 6,700 use cases. 6,700. There were over 110,000 personal wallets and over 8,000 corporate wallets that were being used. And to give you an idea how innovative it was, 2 weekends ago, again, this is not like science fiction, 2 weekends ago, the government of Shenzhen literally did a lottery where they actually gave away to 50,000 residents the equivalent of $30 US of digital currency. And that really gives you an example of how actually people are able to use it. People were using it. And this is actually becoming very interesting. China literally is, as we speak, doing large-scale pilots of CBDC. And that actually puts pressure on the rest of the world from that perspective.
Henri, follow-up question on that. I mean, I was speaking to the architect of the central bank digital currency last year at the Singapore Fintech Festival. We were having our annual IMF advisory board meeting, and the debate was raging in this room about who incurs the cost for widespread implementation of central bank digital currency. We had a bunch of the blockchain guys in the room saying there is no cost. It's free. It's easy to implement. And my argument was, well, no, because merchants need to be able to accept this. And if it's a digital form of acceptance, there's equipment, there's an infrastructure required. And what I was kind of pleased was that the man from China jumped in and said, that's actually the major problem that we're encountering. Because right now with cash, the government pays for the distribution of cash. If we then have a digital infrastructure, maybe some would argue it's unfair on merchants and the consumer to have to cover those costs. How is China now covering this? I haven't kept up to date. I mean, you obviously keep up to date with this stuff. How are they dealing with this, the cost of distribution and acceptance of digital currency?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's actually not a question necessarily I think about a lot, because I think you're absolutely spot on. These are some of the questions I think we will need to ask ourselves. Actually, in my next book, I'm dedicating a couple of pages on this exact topic that you mentioned. Yeah. I think just maybe for the benefit of the audience, to understand is there's different kinds of retail CBDC, retail central bank digital currency. There's one, for example, called the synthetic model, which IMF actually pioneered, which a lot of central bankers disagree, where it's basically non-bank fintech can actually issue currency and it's back one-to-one with the reserve at the central bank, for example. But again, there's one model. There's a platform model which the Bank of England has been promoting since January, where they announced it, and it was actually developed by the Swedes a couple of years ago. But probably the model that is getting the most traction right now globally is what we call a two-tier retail CBDC, which means the central bank issues it, and it is distributed by the member financial institutions or potentially non-bank fintechs as well. And actually, if you look at around the world, the model, that's the model China has taken, that's the model the Bahamas has taken, that's the model actually, the proposal in the US with digital dollar, that's the model as well. And many other places like the Eastern Caribbean, that's the model they're taking as well. For a couple of reasons. One of them, it keeps the banks relevant, frankly.
Yeah, that was a big question, right? Because if you have accounts at the central bank, why do you need the retail banks, right?
Exactly. And actually, frankly, I think no central banker wants to start doing their own KYC and AML on the retail public. Like the system we have right now, again, it may not be perfect, but I think the central bank likes the fact that the KYC and all the work is done by the member banks. And I think that's why I think this system is a good in-between that you are seeing. And I think this is the model that we'll be seeing with the retail CBDC, where the traditional banks, the merchants will be involved in the process. I don't think any central bank wants to start doing their own KYC on it, because there's real risk that you have to consider as well, Nasir. I mean, one of them is actually, I always think with banks, for example, when I have this discussion about CBDC with a lot of bank CEOs, boards of heads of strategy, there's not a direct upside for banks. I mean, if you think about it, tomorrow, if you're a bank and you need to accept CBDC, think about it from a technological investment you need to make to put in a new rails to accept CBDC, the compliance, the framework, the BCP, everything needs to be changed.
Well, that's a big issue. That is a huge issue, I think, particularly in Europe, actually. Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about this. I mean, specifically for us in Luxembourg, in terms of its focus area of investment management and securities industry, for example. I believe there's massive momentum, a momentum that can no longer be ignored in leveraging, obviously, blockchain and security tokens in terms of the future of securitization. However, what I believe is that we have this value chain of activities within, say, the investment management process, where the asset servicing companies, which are traditionally banks, hold all the power. And yet there seems to be very little, incentive for them to adopt or to change at the moment, to the point where, be it wasn't in Europe, we had Fidelity in the US basically create their own custodian because they were getting fed up that the traditional asset servicing firms were not doing anything, right? But it has huge implications on these institutions, and things will change, right? I mean, you talked a little bit about stablecoins and foreign exchange, right? Institutions right now via the SWIFT model earn about 600 million a year, I think, from correspondent banking, from doing nothing, to be fair. I mean, that all dissipates. You're dealing obviously with a whole range of institutions. How are you seeing the attitude changing within the traditional banking sector and their understanding of their future competitiveness in adopting digital assets and digital currency?
Yeah, it's a big question, Nasir, and it's a difficult one as well. I mean, I think there's 2-3 things. I give a lot of analogy of what's happening right now with crypto, digital assets, and banks. Same thing happened a couple of years ago with fintech and banks. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. Actually 4 years ago, date today, was my first TEDx talk on literally called Fintech and the Impact on the Future of Banking.
Yeah.
When that TED Talks came out, I got criticized. I mean, I'm saying I got laughed at by bank CEOs. I got these emails of saying I'm stupid. What am I thinking? Because I was saying at a time, retail people may be very comfortable banking with big tech, opening an account at a big technology firm. I mean, right now we look at it, we're like, yeah, of course. 4 years ago, I mean, I cannot emphasize how many times I got laughed at, letters, so on and so forth, right? Even clients complaining about me because of some of the comments I was making at a time. Same thing is happening right now with crypto. You mentioned correspondent banking. I mean, thankfully, when it comes to the other type of CBDC, there's retail, it's a wholesale CBDC. That's the problem they're trying to tackle. Actually, I'm very involved right now, KMA and Bank of Thailand, wholesale CBDC initiative, where this is exactly what they're tackling. Basically, they're getting rid of the correspondent banking methodology system by letting banks correspond to each other using digital currencies, if you want, the stable coins equivalent. So I think the whole system will go into a change. However, I think everybody knows this. I think that what we often forget, all of us are super excited about fintech, is the human reality. At the end of the day, every person is selfish, will look for their own interest before they look for the interest of the organization. For example, and we've seen this in fintech and regtech. If today you're in senior position of organization, really, let's talk practically. Before these changes affect your P&L, if you're a couple of years retirement, it's not going to impact you.
Yeah, it's one of the issues we've dealt with here in Luxembourg, yes.
Exactly, especially in industries that are more conservative, right? I mean, you mentioned asset servicing, custody, so on and so forth. I remember very good a story that happened to me where it was a certain fintech startup that we presented to a certain organization, a bank, which will remain, of course, nameless. And I told the person in charge, I said, listen, you have this problem. There's a solution that will save you about 20% a year. It's a pretty simple solution. And his answer was, Henry, you know, I have a demanding wife. I have 2 kids in international schools. In 2 years, I'll be back in London. That's going to be somebody else's problem. I'm not going to risk my own career for taking this risk. And as anybody worked in finance knows, if you're in charge, you have the bold initiative to make a change. It doesn't work, you're out. And this is why often the message I give to a lot of people in leadership positions is we need to change. Not only we need entrepreneurs and organizations, but we need to promote people who are taking risks, but also promote failure. People who have tried, but who have failed, because that sends the right signal to this is the kind of how we can innovate. Unfortunately, I think that's something that is lacking, particularly in some of the organizations you mentioned this year that are very, it's recurring revenues, steady, and potentially negative impact will not affect them or their career, but probably the ones of the juniors working for them in their organizations.
Yeah, I mean, the incentive issue is massive. There was a period I had, Henri, last year, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, time flies, where a group of CEOs of very large institutions in Luxembourg all sort of left their jobs or were maybe asked to leave at about the same time. And every single one of them walked through my door saying, I'm going to do something digital now. And by the end of I think the 4th guy that came in, I literally lost the plot. And I said, I came to you and when you had all the capital and all the resources to do something, and you said you weren't going to do it, and now you're telling me digital is the way forward. And this is the problem. It's the incentive model.
But it has a negative impact, right? I mean, as I mentioned before, I was a chairman of the Fintech Association. I just finished my mandatory maximum term a couple of weeks ago. And there's 2 things that bother me in the financial service ecosystem. And I'm very vocal about this. One is a lot of financial institutions who have innovation teams for PR purposes. They want when the kids come in to have a couple of guys in t-shirt and jeans. And if you're doing it for PR purposes, for marketing purposes, frankly, it's bad for the organization, it's bad for your shareholders. But most importantly, it's bad for the startups because these guys are coming in, giving all their soul, their effort, making a strategic decision of where they're going to do that POC, which, by the way, so many institutions don't even pay for POCs, which I find is unacceptable. And these guys actually, the number of fintech startups that have gone bankrupt because of bad faith, or actually, frankly, not even the incentive on the financial institution side, I think it's quite bad. Also, by the way, the same thing for investors. I have always a thing that I tell to a lot of people raising money. If you're meeting an investor, just ask them before how many tickets they've written beforehand. I find, unfortunately, a lot of investors today still waste the time of a lot of startups, waste the time of entrepreneurs. It's entertainment for them. And actually, I think we need to change also the mentality and the mindset of the ecosystem, both at the financial institutions, but also within the investor community as well, to a certain extent.
Yeah. Listen, Henri, I can see a raft of questions coming in, many of them on subjects I wanted to touch with you anyway. So right. I think to make this a bit more engaging, we'll bring in the audience now to start asking the questions.
Hey, Henri, I met you in Hong Kong a few years back and had a question about digital identity and the lack thereof. Also, how threatened is the US dollar in terms of hegemony and trade finance? And I know that the end of correspondent banking is coming. So 3 questions, 3 topics. Thanks very much and great to hear from you.
Well, it's great, Dan, and great to see you again from that perspective. Yeah, a couple of things to address them one by one. Digital identity. I tell this to I do a lot of work with governments and policymakers, regulators. I think before people try to think about the regulatory reforms, often the most important thing to look at the tech stack of a country. The tech infrastructure and digital identity. If you have a proper digital identity ecosystem, it enables so many things. A great example is Singapore, where they've done a great initiative on digital identity, and now the number of startups that can frankly use it and operate on it, you see the ROI very, very quickly. So I think that's very important. The US dollar hegemony, that's topic. It's a question I get asked a lot, actually, especially in the current geopolitical context, especially what's happening next week with the US elections. I do not think even CBDCs or even what's happening in China personally will have an impact in the short or medium term for one very simple reason. Even if we look at stablecoins, before we get to CBDCs, there's a whole era of stablecoins we'll go through. I really believe we're the early days of stablecoins even now. Vast majority of stablecoins right now, last time I checked, was over 95% are in US dollars. So ironically, the stablecoin may give a longer shelf life to the hegemony of the US dollar, at least in the current environment we're seeing now. And also, by the way, for a lot of the traditional providers, what Nasir was mentioning before, some of the traditional service providers, like look at something like Libra, the assets need to be custodied at traditional regulated custodians.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's a great way to continue the shelf life, which I find it, I mean, you may say it's ironic or it is what it is, but that's the one thing. And your third question, Dan, I think was on correspondent banking. I mean, frankly, it's like I started my speeches, I tell everybody who enjoys their banking experience. I still have never met anybody who told me yes, right? I think, unfortunately, the correspondent era, banking era, will take some time. And I think what's sad with the correspondent banking is often it's the smaller banks that obviously paying the price, right? In many small countries, you have a handful of correspondent banks. And, I'm Armenian by background. I spent quite a bit of time in Armenia, and same thing, right? There's about 15 banks. 3 of them have correspondent banking relationship with the US. And you're seeing the impact. That's one for a small country like Armenia that has an impact. Globally, I think correspondent banking relationships had a very negative impact on the crypto industry. I mean, as many of you know, anybody was trying in the crypto industry until very recently, and frankly, in many countries until now, was opening a bank account was one of the most difficult issues. I know the number of fintech crypto startups who have gone bankrupt because the bank closed their account with a month notice. By the way, they don't close the company only, they close the founders' bank accounts as well. And I think and the reason a lot of banks didn't want to get involved was they didn't want to affect their correspondent banking relationships. And that I find has been quite sad from that perspective. So hopefully we'll see some change from that perspective. Actually, by the way, the country I'm very bullish on is actually the US. I'm seeing a lot of interesting development right now coming in on the regulatory side in the US. The OCC, the Office of the Controller of the Currency, is a great example. Some of the other clarifications. So hopefully we're seeing this landscape change a bit, again, in the last 6 months. So it's very exciting. So thank you for your question, Dan.
And an interesting election on Tuesday. So I'm not going to talk politics, I promise. So thanks so much.
That's a different podcast, Dan.
That gets me into trouble.
Yeah. Anthony, maybe we go back up to the start of the list. I think we had Lucy Heavens was actually the first person to post a question. Maybe we could get Lucy live.
Henry, hi, Lucy Heavens here. I was just wondering what fintech firms that you're seeing, kind of exciting new fintech firms in the space, and probably a little bit more from my own interest from the RegTech perspective as well, in helping to regulate cryptocurrencies.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lucy, for your question. Yeah, RegTech is, again, I'm a lawyer by background, so I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to RegTech. I've actually TEDx talk on the future of lawyers and the impact of RegTech and law tech. I really think we're going to go through an era of evolution with RegTech. However, I've been disappointed for a couple of things. One of them, I think the evolution of RegTech, law tech happened way slowly than many us expected it, including myself. I think one of the reasons has been not only lawyers are a bit conservative people, but also, frankly, some of the law societies as well. I mean, good example, this is in the US where, frankly, some of the law societies, it's funny, I have my law diplomas here on my wall, have been suing law tech companies, RegTech companies who are trying to provide services that are more efficient and more effective. And also, obviously, plugging in RegTech, law tech in any financial institution has been extremely, extremely difficult for various reasons. Yourself, Lucy, and many others know. One thing I have to say has been the saving grace, and where I'm very bullish, is the intersection of RegTech and the crypto industry. I mean, if you look today, I would argue many of the large crypto exchanges today are on track of having better KYC, better AML, better market monitoring, better than the traditional banks. Why? Because they don't have the legacy systems, because they're able to leverage the latest RegTech, law tech technology. And that's often, I've seen a lot of RegTechs pivot over the last 18 months, focus on the digital currency space. I mean, not only you see solutions now on KYC, AML, onboarding, and all the gamut there, but also on traceability solutions, which I'm super excited about what I'm seeing right now in the market. So I think the RegTech and law tech space, especially with digital assets, is becoming this 1 + 1 = 3 combination. And I'm very, very excited about that, Lucy.
So, Henri, for Lucy's benefit, I mean, she did ask for a few firms. Could you give us some exciting names?
I never give the names of firms, actually, but I'll tell you the companies in the digital assets. Let's give you focus, right? On the crypto space with RegTech, the type of companies I'm very excited about are the firms that are providing traceability, for example. And there's probably there's 4 or 5 of them in the market. I find because the biggest risk we face in the crypto ecosystem today is that we find out tomorrow morning there's massive levels of money laundering happening in the system, or there's sanctioned countries and nations being involved in. Thankfully, I really believe, actually, and the data shows it as well, it's way less than people think, which is, I think, very positive on that. And I think the traceability solutions are giving comfort not only to financial institutions, but also law enforcement. And that's, I think, very, very important. So I'm very bullish on these companies. And obviously, I'm also very bullish on some of the RegTech companies that are providing, frankly, like the basic KYC and AML and source services for the digital asset space. Again, a greater user experience and so on and so forth. So very, very optimistic in the space.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Henri. Thank you, Lucy. Let's go to Jed then. I think Jed was next in the line.
Hey, Henri. How are you doing today? 2 questions. Bitcoin as a reserve asset, particularly in the U.S., you mentioned you're excited about the U.S. So that's the first question. How do you see that evolving? What's happening there? Obviously, some big movements. And then the second is privacy coins. And I've seen a lot of movement on privacy coins being accepted by regulated exchanges. As long as they got the KYC, what's the difference between a privacy coin and cash? What do you think about those 2 subjects?
Yeah, excellent questions, Jed. Let me tackle them one by one. First, on the Bitcoin as a reserve, I think it's very interesting what we're seeing with some of the U.S. firms, especially Square, with that they have 50 million now on as part of their treasury, and MicroStrategy has 250 million. I think we're going to see this more and more firms do so. Frankly, not because they love crypto, purely as a hedge against inflation. Everybody knows we've been to record levels now of money printing in the system. Yes, you can go buy gold, but I think Bitcoin now is proving more and more that it's not only fits the definition of money as a unit of account, as a medium of exchange, and as a store of value. So I think it's proving from that perspective. That's why from that perspective, I'm quite optimistic on Bitcoin actually, as I think more and more organizations will have it as part of a diversified treasury or portfolio, whatever you want to call it. So I think very interesting developments from that perspective, I have to say. And it's never been easier as well. So even if you look at, for a company right now to buy Bitcoin, there's a number of regulated players right now in the market. There's a number of regulated custodians. It's never been easier. Even if you want to buy listed products, like Grayscale is a great example of a company that's getting record inflows because people are able to buy it, despite a premium, just able to buy it in a normal way if you want, right? So that's one thing I'm watching very carefully from that perspective. Your second question on privacy coins. Oh man, privacy coins. Oh, I'm really a big. I would say haven't made I don't have a personal final view on it, and obviously views always change. Have to say initially I was a bit quite negative on it in the sense that, again, we'll see what's happening with, and again, not to name names, but Zcash and Dash, there's different features in it. Let's say Monero, that is obviously, let's call it a genuine privacy coins. We've seen the US IRS even put a bounty on it of trying to find firms who can actually go to crack Monero. And obviously the reality as well, when you look at the data, a number of, let's call it sanctioned countries like North Korea is a great example. The data shows they're shifting away from Bitcoin to Monero, right? So it is what it is. I personally, I'm a bit surprised to see some of the regulated exchanges start touching them for various simple reasons. However, that being said, I think that a lot of things have changed. A great example, there was actually a great thought leadership piece of this from one of the US law firms about 2-3 months ago that actually I'll be covering not only my book, but I'm covering in my newsletter in I think 2 or 3 weeks because I really believe there's a lot of now more work being done on how we can actually, if we regulate the people trading on exchanges are KYC'd, then why can't we let them use privacy coins and have confidentiality on the transactions? Again, if you think about it today, if I send you a Bitcoin today, Jed, frankly, and all the RegTech firms that I mentioned before should be able to find out that it's Henri sending to Jed and Jed sending to Henri, right? Because we've transacted with other wallets and stuff. And actually, why should I not be able to have the same level of privacy that I have in my traditional finance in the crypto space? And that's why I think my opinion has changed over the last couple of months, where I'm like, you know what? If the exchanges are regulated and people are transacting with privacy coins, actually, why not? I should be entitled to my privacy or my transactions as long as we're operating in that sphere. The one area I'm watching right now, it's going to be very interesting as obviously we're going to FATF rules, recommendation 15, 16, the travel rule, is how we're going to deal with decentralized exchanges. Obviously, everybody's watching knows this, that the DeFi world exploded over the summer. For my next book, I wrote my DeFi chapter in January and February. It's completely scrapped now. I have to completely rewrite it because it completely changed so much over the summer. I think it's going to be very interesting how we deal with issues of privacy, AML, KYC, if regulations with DeFi because obviously if you're a criminal with basic knowledge of crypto right now, you're not going to trade on the regulated exchanges. You're going to go trade it on DeFi and other mixers and other ways, right? So I think it's going to become very, very interesting in the space, Jed. Thanks for your question. Very exciting questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jed. Thanks, Henri. Ladies and gentlemen, we are sort of coming towards the end of this fantastic talk with Henri. There's two questions, and I apologize to everyone else who's asked. There are many, many questions, Henri, online, but these two questions are sort of interrelated, and I do want to go to them. So I'm going to jump to Philippe Noltner. Sorry, Philippe, apologies. Please ask your question. This is very perfect.
So I think, Henri, as I'm sure you're aware, there's been legislative proposals at the EU level concerning MiCA and the pilot regime. So the first one concerns issuances of crypto assets and the related services for these coins. And the second is actually about DLT MTFs and DLT security settlement systems. And so I think it would be interesting to get your view sort of as an outsider from the EU and Luxembourg landscape as to whether you think this will have a positive effect and sort of bring more business to the EU, or will this have actually a negative effect and sort of drive businesses back to Asia and keep it there?
Yeah, excellent question, Philippe. Thank you very much. By the way, excellent questions, Philippe, and everybody else. I'm very impressed. One thing, Philippe, I would say with the EU rules, I'm quite. I think it's very good rules that have been put in place. First of all, I've said at the EU level, especially look at the ECB, for example, right? I think really since Christine Lagarde came from the IMF, I think we've seen a rise of knowledge, information come out on digital currencies, which is shows you the importance of leadership in organizations and what topics will be driven, which I think has been quite interesting. I think I'm quite optimistic on the role of the EU in the space. As you mentioned before, a lot of activity in the crypto space is taking place in Asia. I would argue, actually, when I look holistically, Asia is probably 6 to 12 months ahead of other parts of the world when it comes to not only crypto, but I would say digital assets more broadly, not only from a retail adoption, retail trading, but also what we are seeing on the, let's say, policy side or regulatory side, right? I mean, look at CBDCs, for example. I would argue of course, retail CBDC China is years ahead, but even you look at the wholesale CBDC level, that cross-border correspondent banking issue, I would argue probably what's happening right now in Thailand and in Hong Kong between them is very, very advanced. Even Cambodia, yesterday, Cambodia announced a whole new payment system that is DLT based as well. Extremely, extremely innovative as well. So I think these are countries that don't get media attention. Cambodia, by the way, I'm surprised the media is not talking more about it. I think it's super innovative. I think this is the public relations and media awareness actually made a big difference in the crypto space. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of PR BS, and I think it's too bad that often we forget some of the core elements. So I'm quite optimistic on the EU elements, especially on some of the developments around DLT and what's going to happen. So let's see. I'm following it very closely. I think it's too early to tell, honestly, but definitely I think I'm watching it very, very closely. I'm quite optimistic about it as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Philippe. And again, Henri. And so I think coming to the last question, which is somewhat related and maybe focusing on a more micro level, can we have Laura Marocchini come on, please?
I just left Nasir.
Oh dear, Lawrence left. I'm going to ask his question then, because I think this is a nice way to finish up here, Henri. So Laurent is asking, where do you believe Luxembourg has a role to play in the blockchain and crypto field? What can we do more of here?
Great question. First of all, I have to say,
it's a great way to finish, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm a big fan of Luxembourg. Like I said, I look forward to being back in person. I was last there, actually, with spending some time with my PwC colleagues there. Very optimistic on I think the asset management sector and the asset servicing sectors. If they're able to innovate in the right manner, there's a tremendous potential coming ahead. For sure, the role that Luxembourg has played the last couple of years of being, a fund domicile or a custodian, the traditional providers, the way that business will need to evolve, especially as we move to this space. So I think if done properly, and I'm not talking about the strategy, but the execution is done properly, that involves not only the policymakers, not involve the ecosystem players, but also the companies involved in it as well. I think there's a tremendous potential. That same thing like fintech and crypto. I think the existing financial centers or existing asset management centers have an edge over other new entrants in the market when it comes to the domination of the space. You know, for many countries, crypto provided this kind of new advantage. You know, look at what happened in Malta and Gibraltar, other places around the world. They tried to actually gave them a chance to position themselves. I think the traditional ecosystems have an advantage to maintain their lead or even jump it if they're able to actually adapt quickly. And I think this is why organizations like yourself, the LHoFT Foundation, and what Nasir, you and the entire team has been doing, and frankly, the entire ecosystem plays a big, big role in making this happen. Not only, frankly, for all of us, but most importantly, for the young people in our ecosystem and our kids who will be hopefully entering this ecosystem over the next decades.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henri. As I said, great time to end there. I know you've got more work to get on with this evening, so I don't want to hold you up till too late. Henri, thank you very much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. I greatly enjoyed speaking with you. I hope to bump into you physically again sometime soon at a conference, or hopefully when you come to visit Luxembourg.
Very happy to do so, Nasir, and merci beaucoup to everyone in beautiful Luxembourg. And for people who want to keep in touch, the best way often is on my Twitter, on Henri Arslanian, my LinkedIn page as well, where I have my weekly shows, the Crypto Capsule, Fintech Capsule, or my YouTube page as well, where I have a lot of my videos there. So very happy to talk, and à la prochaine, as we say in Luxembourg. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I look forward.
And thank you, all of you, for tuning in and listening. And we look forward to welcoming you to our next Global Leadership webinar in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.